Hey guys, it's Mac again this morning down at the farm for the holidays, and was out doing some shooting this morning. It actually brought up a question in my mind that I think probably a lot of people have, and that's the age-old debate of 1911 versus Glock, or 1911 versus SIG, or 1911 versus anything. All handguns, modern at least, are measured against the 1911. So being a Glock shooter, especially in competition, and being a fan of the 1911, I was sort of tossing back and forth in my mind this morning, how do they measure up? So very briefly, let's just look at the two and see what each has going forward and against it. Well, let's just talk a minute about comparing and contrasting the 1911 design versus the Glock design. So the 1911, was designed by John Moses Browning, who is a sort of a personal gun hero of mine. I think he's the greatest gun designer of all time. I've always been a fan of Browning firearms, and the 1911 is probably one of his most famous designs. He did it way back when, more than 100 years ago, and the 1911 model was named because it was adopted in the year 1911. And it is the standard for which I believe all handguns are measured. I think the greatest aspect of a 1911 is its trigger. Trigger design and the trigger pull on your standard average run-of-the-mill 1911 pistol is going to be better than about any other trigger that you're going to find in a handgun. It's definitely better, I believe, than the out-of-the-box Glock trigger. And the one on this LTC 1911 really blows this Glock out of the water. This Para 1911 is a smaller version. It's more like a Colt Commander. It's got a 4 1/4 inch barrel, but has all the typical features you see from the 1911 design. Here's your thumb safety. Here's your beaver tail grip safety. Both of those have to be deactivated in order for the weapon to fire. The beaver tail grip safety, I think, is an ingenious design because it means that the shooter has to be holding on to the hand grip here in a normal shooting position in order for the hammer to be decocked. That keeps you from accidentally dropping the firearm on the ground as you're carrying it, and potentially having a negligent discharge. These are designed to be carried cocked and locked. This is why the thumb safety is important, because you're going to carry one in the chamber and with your hammer cocked here. That's how this firearm is designed to be carried as a personal defense weapon, and it's probably how it should be carried. This particular model also has very sleek, like Novak low-profile sights. So this is a 1911 that I would carry simply because of how thin and how sleek the design is, and this is a very reliable design, the 1911 is. If you notice the grip angle here, I believe it's about 105 degrees. This is what feels most natural to me, this grip angle. Now you compare this to the Glock. The Glock has a little bit more obtuse of a grip angle. So if you put these on top of each other, you'll notice that the Glock design, the hand grip is angled a little bit more backwards toward the shooter. And if you put both of these in your hand in your standard grip, naturally the muzzle of the Glock would tend to sort of be elevated some if you kept the same grip angle with your hands. You'll have to make some adjustment in your mind and in your hands when you switch from a 1911 to a Glock, simply because of the difference in grip angle. There's a little more angle to the Glock, so you'll need to think in your mind that you need to bring the muzzle down some. So when I'm switching back and forth between these, there is a little bit of a learning curve as you go back and forth. The Glock design in itself, is fairly new. Gaston Glock, who came up with this design, may end up, after history's been looked at, may end up be as considered as innovative a designer as John Browning, but you know, time will tell. The Glock Design is pretty innovative in that it uses a polymer frame and the metal slide. It's very light, it's very dependable. You know, you've seen videos of people throwing these in buckets of sand and leaving them in there for a long time and then pulling them out and, you know, shooting round after round flawlessly. This model is the Glock 34, which is my newest addition that I picked up here around the holidays. And this is a competition model Glock. You can see it's got the open slide at the top. It's got a 5.3 inch barrel, which I think is sort of modeled after a 1911. 1911s typically have 5-inch slides. So the extended sight radius and the length on the barrel helps this be a little bit more accurate handgun, and that's why it's one of Glock's competition models. The 34 and the 35 are what's considered Glock's competition pistols, 34 being 9mm, the 35 being the 40. The trigger on this out of the factory is pretty good. It's better than other Glock factory triggers that I have. It's a smooth trigger, and it also just has the trigger safety. This is the Glock's only safety right here. You have to be pushing the trigger safety down in order to press the trigger. If you don't have that little tiny bar in the middle of the trigger pushed down, you can see it prevents the trigger from being pulled. It's an internal striker design. There's no hammer on the back that can be cocked like on the 1911. So it's a compact and self-enclosed design that works very well. It has a repeatable and consistent trigger pull because it's double action only, with the 1911 being single action, double action. There's, you know, definitely a difference in your first trigger pull versus every follow-up shot, but the single action on this 1911 is, in my opinion, unable to be beaten. I forgot to mention actually too, the best part about the Glock is the magazine capacity. I think your typical 1911 is going to have a 7-round single stack magazine capacity, 7+1. This 9mm has actually 9 that it will hold in this magazine, 9+1. The Glock, this standard Glock 17 magazine, which also fits the 34, comes with 17 rounds, and then I can overload it also with my magazine extensions that I use in competition and get another 5 rounds in there, so 22 rounds in a double stack magazine. Just really blows 7+1 out of the water. It's something to keep an eye on, especially with the political climate the way it is right now. If there is any legislation against high capacity magazines, you know, this might be something that you're unable to get anymore, and you may see people moving back toward the 1911 design. I know that happened back in the 90s. There was a resurgence in the 1911 simply because of the magazine capacity being legal, and it's something to keep an eye on depending on what happens. But I think the big positive in favor of the Glock, in addition to being light and having the consistent trigger pull, is the magazine capacity being more than double the size of the 1911. So really it's up to you. You know, you've got a good compare and contrast here of these two designs. Which is better for you, the classic, traditional, and time-tested design of the 1911, which is, you know, been around for 100 years. It's been the stock service pistol in the military for many of those years. It's one of the most accurate handguns that you're going to be able to get. It's safe, it's reliable, and it's really the standard. In contrast to the Glock, which is fairly new compared to the 1911 design, but it's a revolutionary design. It's a repeatable, consistent trigger pull action with a high capacity magazine, and you know, history in several years may look back at the Glock as being as revolutionary handgun as the 1911. So, choice is up to you. Let's see what these things will do with some live rounds inside them, and see what they'll do against each other on some targets. You know, I've done a good bit of shooting with both these handguns this morning. They both perform excellently, so why don't we just put them to the test at 25 yards, you know, instead of the typical 7 or 10. So let's see what these guys will do. We'll go with the 1911 first. Not too bad. Well, 1911 put a pretty good target down there, so the Glock's going to have its work cut out for it. Alright, let's go check these targets out. Now, both these targets look pretty good. One does look a little better than the other. So, this target I shot with a 1911, and I had better accuracy. I guess I had better precision with this one. I got more in the middle of the target, but I only got 6 out of 10, or 6 out of 9, sorry, on the actual target. I think I pulled a couple low left down here on the wood. I think the first couple of shots until I got used to my trigger pull there. Now this is my Glock 34, and this is what I'm used to shooting. I had 10 rounds in there, and I got all 10 on the paper. 1, 2, 3. There's a couple holes there, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think there's actually 2 there, so all 10 on the paper there, but not quite as precise as the 1911. So I'm impressed with both of them. I certainly could do a little bit better as far as my part as the shooter. And this is just the first cold target of the day, so sure as I get warmed up I'd probably do a little better as well. But that's it for the Glock versus 1911 comparison video, and this is the results you see on the range. You make the decision for yourself on which you think is